Hello and welcome to the COMMnections webinar series, brought to you by the Master of Arts in Communication program and the Johns Hopkins University Office of Advanced Academic Programs. Today's event features a discussion with Brenda Philpo on political persuasion in an AI world. My name is Peter Huggins, and I'm the event producer. Please note today's event will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the COMMnections playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we'll answer as many questions as possible during the latter portion of the event. With that, I'll turn the event over to our moderator, Dr. Patricia Hernandez, Assistant Program Director and Senior Lecturer for the Master of Arts in Communication program.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm thrilled to have Heather here to discuss her experience with over 15 years of experience in data analytics and over 20 years of experience within multiple industries of nonprofit, political, and public affairs. She currently serves as Executive Vice President for more, and I will turn it over to her because I know that's why you are all here, is to hear from her, and she'll talk more about her background and share her experience and expertise with us. And she's also one of those rare people that have been in DC for more than 4 years at a time. So it's a pleasure to have her here, and I've been fortunate to meet her in person. And when I did, I knew she'd be an excellent speaker for this series. So I'm thrilled to have you here, Heather. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Dr. Hernandez. And I'm thrilled to be with all of you this evening as we discuss a topic that I know is top of mind for so many of us. Tonight, we're going to analyze the role that AI is playing in American politics. And as Dr. Hernandez had mentioned, my experience in the realm of data and analytics stretches back more than 15 years. I've been strategizing with political campaigns and nonprofits on how to maximize their revenue through the use of predictive models, primarily in their fundraising programs. This campaign season will mark my 20th year working in politics and my 5th presidential cycle. Now, as a side note, I have worked with presidential campaigns on both sides of the aisle, and I can do that because data is agnostic. Now, before we dig into our presentation, when we think about artificial intelligence and what it is, these are typically the images that come to mind. We think of the Terminator, and we think of Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, "I'll be back." And we think of evil machines taking over the world. Or if you're from my generation, you will remember this movie. This is Matthew Broderick in the movie War Games. And he hacks into a computer, a machine learning computer at NORAD, and begins playing a game with it. That game happens to be global thermal nuclear war, and he has the potential to blow up the planet. Now, while this is Hollywood's characterization and really over-dramatization of what artificial intelligence is, what we will learn tonight will be something much, much different and hopefully less scary. So with that, I really want to focus our time on 4 main points tonight. We'll examine the evolution of AI in American politics over the past 2 decades. We'll also look at the differences between predictive AI and generative AI. What are they, and what are their applications? The use of AI in American politics currently, is it a friend or is it a foe? And we'll also have some fun foretelling what's to come. So we jump right in with looking at the 2004 election. And here we have President Bush running for re-election against John Kerry. Now, it's interesting to note that the use of AI was not used in this election at all, ever. But it's important to highlight this election because I like to say that this is really the opening salvo for the use of machine learning and complex algorithms to enter the picture just 4 short years later in 2008. What we saw happen in 2004 was the introduction of a methodology that we call micro-targeting and creating voter propensity models, which allow campaigns to segment their voters based off of specific issues. Now, micro-targeting is the marriage of polling data with demographic, psychographic, and behavioral data, or what we like to call big data. This allows a campaign to gain a complete 360-degree view of what an ideal voter looks like. And then, of course, you can apply this to voter identification efforts, education, and get out the vote. Where this was critical was polling data from the Bush campaign showed that a marriage amendment was going to be a big issue. Through the use of micro-targeting, the campaign was able to really drive out turnout, specifically in some key battleground states, which helped him close the gap. But where it really took it over the top was in the state of Ohio, where he was able to win 51% of the vote. And this ultimately led to him winning re-election in the presidency. We now have Senator Obama running against Senator McCain in 2008. Now, this election was a pivotal turning point in politics. Why? Because it was the first time that a majority of the voting age population actually engaged with politics within the online channel. So a lot of political dialogue, dissent, and marketing took place on social media platforms. The Obama campaign was a trailblazer in harnessing the power of data-driven analytics, targeted advertising in the political arena through the use of machine learning algorithms. So they were able to develop intricate models that personalized social media and email messaging based on data derived from social media activity. In the data world, we like to call this metadata or digital exhaust data. We now find ourselves at the 2012 election with President Obama running for re-election against Governor Mitt Romney. Now, if we thought 2008 was cutting edge with the use of machine learning algorithms, the Obama campaign took it to a whole new level by assembling a team of over 100 data analysts to construct a parallel processing tool for predictive modeling, which played a critical role in guiding strategic decision making. And it's interesting because what was considered mind-blowing back then is really now standard place in American politics, the use of these type of technologies. Here's where things get really interesting when it comes to AI. This is the 2016 campaign where we saw Donald Trump run against Secretary Clinton. And the Clinton campaign elevated the use of AI and machine learning and took it to an unprecedented level, really by looking at the learnings of the Obama campaign in 2008 and in 2012, recognizing those successes and figuring out how do we really blow this out. So there was a post-mortem analysis that was published in the Washington Post after this election, and it revealed that the Clinton campaign developed a machine learning algorithm named Ada, which turned out to be the man behind the man, or the driving force behind the campaign. So Ada was instrumental in virtually all strategic decisions made by the Clinton team. And this included where to deploy the candidate, her surrogates, how often they should buy linear television, the media buys itself, but also when to stay off the radar and go dark. And I will say this is a masterclass on why one should never over rely on the use of AI and machine learning for decision making, because some critics argue that the over reliance led to the campaign's failure to recognize the vulnerability of the blue wall, which Wisconsin sits in the Midwest. We arrive at 2020. We have Donald Trump running for re-election against Joe Biden. And it seems that the lessons from 2016 were heeded because the campaigns decided to use AI and machine learning for very different purposes. Primarily, they used it for advertising and marketing rather than driving overarching strategic guides. And this was really more around media placement and what platforms they should be targeting their voters and their donors on. Together, the campaigns invested $200 million, I think it's over 200 million, in AI-powered advertising. So take that number and compare it to what the Obama campaign did, which was considered groundbreaking at the time in 2008, when they spent $643,000 on Facebook. We've now had a brief history lesson on the uses of AI in presidential politics. And now I would like to dive in and discuss what predictive and generative AI is. What is the difference and what are their applications? And I'm going to play a snippet of a video for you from a movie, The Avenger Endgame, because I always get asked, what is machine learning? What are predictive models? And I think this best illustrates, or Hollywood best illustrates, really a model in action.
Blowing my mind.
Excuse me? But does your friend often do that?
Strange. We all right? Be back here.
Hey, what was that?
Went forward in time to view alternate futures, to see all the possible outcomes of the coming conflict.
How many did you see?
14,605,000.
How many did we win?
So that is the best illustration I can give somebody who has never worked in data and analytics. What does a predictive model do in action? You watched it. Dr. Strange went into the future, pulled out his crystal ball, and ran over 100 million plus scenarios on basically how to save humanity from the bad guy, right? So yes, you can use predictive AI for that, but there's lots and lots of other applications that are actually real world that we use them in daily. So predictive AI refers to the use of machine learning to identify patterns in past events and then make predictions about future events. And it's a lot like having a Doctor Strange or a crystal ball, but instead of mystical powers, it relies on statistical analysis to access vast amounts of data. You know, I work for the largest fundraising and marketing company in North America, and we always like to say that we take a data-driven approach to how we look at marketing. And at the center of what we do is what we call a constituent data platform. And what that is, it's the use of big data and different types of data to enable us to build models to look at a 360-degree profile about how a donor is most likely to behave. And the type of data, when we talk about big data and predictive analytics, you're usually looking at three main sources, the first of which is demographics. Most of us have heard of demographics. That's your age, your income, it is ethnicity. It's a whole host of different things. We also have attitudinal behavior. And typically what classifies attitudinal behavior is a voter file. It's also the use of surveys, polling data. Behavioral data is also part of this equation, and usually what that is that is your online behavior. So we like to look at where your eyeballs are living, what type of content you're consuming, and how often you are consuming that. What is the big leveler, and we'll learn this shortly in a minute, is transactional data. And so transactional data is how a person votes with their wallet. Where are you spending your money? How often are you doing that? Who are you donating to? Which candidates are you supporting? And so we always like to say transactional data is the big game changer. Once you take a big data set like that, you then apply machine learning. Really what that is, it's a mathematical algorithm. And it's trained by computer programs to identify patterns within the data, and it allows for that to learn. Then once you get that model to where it wants to be, it can then provide forecasting. So it uncovers hidden patterns, relationships between the variables, and it allows for the prediction of future events, scenarios, and outcomes. So much of my experience within data and analytics has been within the realm of cooperative database solutions. Now, cooperative databases have been around a long time, and they were first leveraged within the catalog and commercial space. Publishers have used them, nonprofits used them. Political campaigns and organizations were really the last to come to the game, and they started using these large data sets and databases starting in 2010. And cooperative databases is also leveraging the power of predictive analytics and machine learning through the use of other files or member data that is being contributed typically every 30 days into a database. So you have the shared cooperation of multiple data files flowing into a database. We're then able to take the data sets that I had just mentioned, the demographics, behavioral, attitudinal data, marry that to transactional data, and then figure out who is most likely to respond to a campaign appeal for a donation. Again, this can be leveraged on the charitable side as well as on the political side. But we did see Republicans being early adapters to this type of data. Democrats followed suit a little later, but we did see the GOP start to test this type of data. I also want to talk about voter propensity models, because we've talked a lot about get out the vote and how campaigns can identify who is likely to turn out, how to educate voters, how to ID specific type of voters on the issues. And this is just really a brief thumbnail sketch on how one goes about building a voter propensity model. And like it is with all model builds, you always start by defining a problem. Typically in politics, it's whether a person will vote, who they will vote for, and whether or not they're going to respond to a particular messaging or campaign appeal. We then go about collecting the data that is relevant to solve the problem. And again, this could include demographic information. It always includes past voting behavior that you can get off of voter files. Really what we like to look at is how often somebody votes. Are you somebody that never misses a primary? Are you somebody that only votes in general elections? Typically, people who only vote in general elections, we like to call whether or not you're registered as a Republican or Democrat a soft R or a soft D. If you're somebody that never misses primaries, you are a hard R or a hard D. We also like to look at if you're new to the process and you're a first-time voter. All that data comes into play when we're considering a model build. After that, we process your data and we get it ready for onboarding, because a data algorithm has to be able to learn in a very fixed, standardized formats. You can't have 15 different files going in and it's wonky and different formats. A machine learning algorithm will never learn unless your file is very fixed. So we like to clean the data, run it through hygiene, and make sure that it's ready for the model to learn. We then train the model and we pick a particular algorithm based off of the issue. And that's taking that pre-processed file that I just described, so it can now learn the patterns. We then evaluate the model, and we always set aside a piece of data to compare it against, because rather than have everything going into the model, we like to see how these things are going to behave in a real world setting. And you can only do that by setting a test file aside to see how what you have created will interact with it. And then you iterate and improve, because as much as we try to be perfect, we don't always hit a home run right out of the park. And so sometimes a model does need tweaking. After you get it to where you need it to be, it's ready for application. And this is particularly useful for micro-targeting, for voter outreach, and get out the vote. I wanted to touch on this quickly because so many people don't realize how far we've come with our ability to analyze thousands of data variables at one time to identify an individual. And this is all made possible through the use of what we call cloud-based architecture. Cloud-based architecture is very secure. It is scalable. It allows computing for organizations to scale quickly. It's very accessible. I mean, if you want to think of you interacting with the cloud personally, we think of our iPhones or our Samsung phones. And if you're like me that likes to keep pictures on there since the beginning of time, those are all loaded into a cloud that I can access at any time, or text messages or emails. All of that gets caught up into a cloud-based environment. They're also relatively inexpensive compared to traditional hardware. They're also very reliable and secure. The US government leverages the power of AWS for all of its sensitive data. It's also very flexible. Cloud computing offers a wide range of deployment options. Now, when we look at the old school way of traditional infrastructure, I remember one of the first data shops I ever worked with going back 10 years ago, and we had a server room with over 250 servers. It was dark, and it was always kept at like 38 degrees. And anytime we wanted to accelerate the flow of data, we had to go buy another server. So it was very clunky. And you also had to service it pretty often, which is never great in the world of politics, because politics never run 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's a full contact sport. You're on it 7 days a week. So when we were having to service these very large servers as part of traditional infrastructure, it was hard to sometimes get data out, unfortunately. But there are some benefits to it. You do have control. You have the ability to walk into a room to lock it and know that your computing is safe behind a locked door. But by and large, it's clunky, and your access to the number of variables can be limited because you have to continue to buy servers. Cloud-based solutions totally clear that. We're going to talk about generative AI now. So I like to call generative AI the new shiny object because it just hit the scene in 2022. And I'm a big fan of it. And generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence, and it is capable of generating new content. So text, images, videos, and other data, just like marketing copy. It's used to generate models, often in response to prompts. So what you will find is, as we dig into this, that the back end to generative AI is predictive AI, and they're very much married to one another. We like to call generative AI in the world of data unstructured AI, and predictive models structured AI, because you're working off of a very specific data set. Generative AI models learn patterns and structures of their input data, and then train and generate new data that has similar characteristics. And these models also use neural networks and patterns to find new content within the data. They're also trained on large, unbiased data sets, which require complex math and lots of computing to create. So some examples of these tools, large language models, which most are familiar with, like ChatGPT and the creation of content. Also Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, Midjourney and DALL-E for text to video type solutions. And it's also worth noting that a lot of these particular programs also have a free version, so they're very cost effective. So we've had the history lesson, and we have now learned what predictive AI is, what generative AI is, and their use cases. So now we're going to look at the use of AI in American politics. Is it a friend or is it a foe? So before we dive into the benefits and the risks that are associated with this, I really wanted to set the stage with just some national sentiment numbers on some recent polling that was taken. And by the way, this is nothing that all of you don't know. It's going to reaffirm what so many of us think. But according to recent polls, trust in the US government is at a 70-year low. And as of September 2023, fewer than 2 in 10 Americans actually trust the government in Washington to do what is right. This is among the lowest trust measures in nearly 7 decades of polling. In addition, a majority of US adults do not trust the government or their elected official to do what's best for the country. And 78% believe that the government makes decisions based on political reasons and not what's in the best interest of the public. Why do I mention this? I mention this because this sets the stage, unfortunately, for some bad actors to come in and really exploit AI and really play into what we call confirmed biases, which is unfortunate. Because what we'll also find is that there's a lot of great uses for this particular technology, especially when it comes to building bridges, I believe, between two political parties. So let's start with the risks. The use of deepfakes and falsehoods. So after the release of ChatGPT in November of 2022, considerable volume of commentary centered around the possibility that such content could lead to a disinformation nightmare. And it would even be exploded upon in the 2024 election. And intensifying these worries is the rapidly progressing capability of AI to mimic reality, making it progressively more difficult for voters and constituents to differentiate between material that is generated by AI and that which is created by humans. And now I'm going to play for you a robocall that I'm sure many of you heard about that was deployed on the eve of the New Hampshire primary. This was very interesting because you will find that it mimicked and sounded a lot like President Biden.
It's important that you save your vote for the November election. Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again.
So that was the use of AI learning and mimicking the speech patterns of President Biden and his tone. What was more confusing was that he told everybody to stay home and save their vote for the November election rather than participating in the democratic process. And so this use of deepfakes is really what creates a lot of public mistrust. There's also a lack of regulation, unfortunately around this type of technology. And given the current absence of regulations, there's a growing apprehension that anti-democratic groups and otherwise bad actors could exploit AI-driven advertising technology to unleash torrents of misinformation. This very real possibility underscores the urgency to develop robust detection systems so that voters and donors can rapidly spot manipulated or fabricated content. And the technology isn't perfect. You still have to QC what comes out of these things. So this image was taken from a mayoral candidate that was running for office in Toronto, Canada. And you will see that there's a man and a woman, and the woman has 3 arms, which most of us don't have 3 arms. But again, you have to check everything that comes out of these because it's not a perfect science. And then the DeSantis campaign released this when he was still in the presidential primary. And, you know, this is President Trump embracing Dr. Anthony Fauci. And out of these 6 images, 50% of them are real and the other half are not. And you really have to study what these images are to start to identify which ones are real and which ones are fake. But it's getting harder and harder as this technology improves. So it isn't all bad. You can use AI's powers for good also, and there's a tremendous amount of benefits. And we're going to dive into these now. And I will tell you that one of my favorite uses of this technology and how it will be applied in the future is that it can be a powerful tool for voters and constituents to navigate complex pieces of legislation. You know, when we think about some of the bills that are passed and debated and discussed on Capitol Hill, most people know little about what's actually in them, other than what various media outlets tell us about what's in the pieces of legislation. AI allows for very complex issues to be taken at this size and boiled down to a very easy to understand, user-friendly minimum. And so by simplifying legislative text, AI can make it easier for voters to understand the implications of different laws. It also allows the easy tracking of votes. And you can track how your representatives in Washington vote on different pieces of legislation. And this can help voters understand how their representatives, their positions, and also hold them accountable. There's also a policy simulation piece in place, which I find interesting. AI can simulate the impacts of policy decisions before they are ever implemented, which is huge. And this will help voters understand the potential effects of the legislation. There are also AI assistants. They can answer questions about the legislation and help voters understand complex text, legal text, and other implications. One of my other favorite uses of this piece of technology is really empowering campaigns with fewer resources. You know, once upon a time, you couldn't really run for office unless you were backed by a lot of big money, or you yourself had a lot of money to run for office, because you had to go out and hire the best political strategist and a big agency to really back you, to really help produce content around your campaign. Well, AI tools kind of help level the playing field in a way that we've never seen before. So because these tools are low cost and user-friendly, they require no prior knowledge of machine learning or how to build models. These programs and applications do it for you. Again, like I said, we used to outsource targeted advertising to a lot of campaigns. You don't have to do that now. You can keep a lot of this in-house. And the content generated by AI can compete with the complexity of high budget campaigns. It also improves ad effectiveness. AI's ability to generate well-reasoned political arguments tightly around an audience's targeted preferences stand to improve the overall effectiveness of micro-targeting. Because we leverage big data sets to know what your likes and dislikes are, your preferences, it allows us to zero in and speak to you how often you want to be spoken to. I think of the days when we didn't have this technology around, and I'll use an example from the commercial sector. You would receive lots and lots of catalogs or mail pieces that otherwise were never targeted to you. They just blasted something out because they assumed you might like it. Well, assumptions are dangerous, especially in politics. And now you can really target and cut back on the amount of marketing one receives based off of what big data is telling us. And so it's great that we can now really speak to an individual in a true one-to-one type capacity. And oddly enough, early evidence suggests that voters actually find AI-generated issues or AI-generated images. They actually like them over what humans can create. And they prefer them because they're easy to read, they're fact-driven arguments, and they are typically done in a more positive tone. This is an example that I was able to pull on the use of AI's powers for good. And again, this is really driving home the point that everything within political marketing is going toward a real one-to-one type scenario. So a political campaign wanting to address unique concerns of different voters. Again, we're not treating voters like they're one monolithic block anymore. Those days are completely gone. So when we consider women who are worried about reproductive rights and access to healthcare, or young voters who are participating in the democratic process for the first time, parents who are unsure about educational opportunities that may exist, or rural communities facing problems with limited infrastructure. I think of a lack of access to broadband right off the top of my head when I think of rural communities. So AI allows campaigns and politicians to communicate with each of these constituencies in one-to-one and feasibly assist in developing targeted messages that address these concerns and more. Indeed, this year, major platforms like Google and Meta have begun implementing AI-powered tools for advertisers that aim to make personalization of ad messages easier and more efficient. And now we'll move into foretelling the future. What do I think? I think that it's here to stay. AI is definitely here to stay. It's not leaving us ever anytime soon. And I think its role is going to continue to grow. And so as we look at the future of AI in politics, we can expect it to be transformative and multifaceted. I think it will help and allow for smarter policy-making decisions. Why? Because it will allow lawmakers to sift through large amounts of data to help inform government policy decisions, lawmakers and their staff. It can predict and help prevent instances of election interference and improve public services. It can also enable comprehensive, faster, and a more rigorous approach to policymaking. AI can also help governments meet the needs of their citizens, making it a better use of taxpayer dollars. And I know that this one is going to be hard to believe, but it can actually make the US government more efficient from an operations standpoint. I know no one wants to believe that, but it really can. It also allows, as we just discussed, for precise message targeting. AI allows for the ability for crucial campaign messages to get out quickly, and candidates can fine-tune these targeting targeting messages to reach those who have not yet made up their mind, perhaps in the political process, and give them the exact message that will help them reach their final decisions. As I said, in a war room type setting where speed is critical, it allows politicians and lawmakers to respond quickly to something that is hot, especially in the media. And so AI can scan the internet, it can think about strategy, and it can come up with a hard-hitting appeal, enabling a communication staff to get it out quick. And this one is my favorite because I don't know, maybe one day we'll have an AI candidate. Maybe we won't even need people to run for office. Maybe people are just outdated. It's amazing. But there actually is a growing interest in the possibility of AI or technologically assisted candidates running and winning an election. And it's certainly possible. We just listened to a Biden robocall happen that was all developed using AI, and it sounded just like the president. So I guess we're not too far off base, perhaps. Maybe machines will one day run the world. And with that, I thank you so much. And I want to open the floor for questions.
Thank you. I will go ahead and moderate the Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, just go ahead and put it in the chat box, and I will read them off as they come in. So the first one is from Matt. The question is, would you say that AI is currently more effective and accurate in identifying the people to target or in the creation of the message itself?
Okay, so the question was, is AI more effective to target? And give me that again, Dr. Hernandez.
More effective and accurate in identifying the target, I think target audience, or in the creation of the message itself. So is it more effective in identifying target audience or message creation? I think.
So this is interesting, right? Because do I think AI is more effective at targeting? Yes, absolutely. Why do I say that? Because before, in the old school SAS regression world, if you wanted to build a predictive model, you were looking at possibly working with maybe 30, 35, 45 variables, data variables at the most, kind of going into a model to inform it. Now with these cloud-based architectures and the ability for us to store data at unprecedented levels, the amount of data you could have flowing into a model to allow that model to be better and that much more accurate is possible through the use of all of these tools. And I will say that the messaging piece of this is potentially more accurate depending on your input. So we always like to say that model that we build to solve a problem will ultimately react to what you put into it. We always say this in the world of donors when we're looking to find donors. People always say, I want people that are going to give to me right now, and I want big gifts and all of these different things. And then we bust them. Because then when they send us data to model off of, and they send us all their old donors, and this thing doesn't perform at the level it needs to, we're like, well, you send us old data. So Matt, to answer your question, AI has the potential to also be more accurate with its messaging depending on what your inputs are. So if you have very clean, very recent inputs, both informing the model and the marketing communications that it's ultimately going to be outputting for you, then I think you're in good shape.
Thank you. And the next question is, what are some of the biggest regulatory and legislative challenges you foresee with regards to the effective use of AI in public policy settings and otherwise? And there's a second part of the question. I'll read that, but then I'll go back to the first one. There is an increasing trend in AI regulation around the world. Do you feel that there is a sufficient level of understanding of the underlying technology to enable effective regulation of such nascent technology?
Well, let me answer the second part first,
Okay.
and then circle back to the first part. I will say that this technology, generative AI, and predictive AI, but mostly generative AI, because it's the newest to the scene, is a moving target. Okay, so we do not know just what the effects are, and the likelihood of them being outdated. I mean, if you think about how rapidly growing these technologies are, I mean, I have an iPhone 8, right? Like, it works great. Eventually I got to bump it up because it's like at a 15, you know? These things get outdated every year. And if you apply that same mindset to technology, because we are still studying and learning what the effects are of generative AI in particular, it allows for a moving target as to how quickly we can, you know, what those regulations should be. I will say this, what technology, big technology companies are trying to do, like IBM in particular. IBM had a great blog that was out a couple weeks ago on how they are spending a lot of R&D dollars to really invest in detection systems, to really help with that, especially with the use of deep fakes. So I will tell you that there's a lot of speculation around this. It's a moving target, and people are still trying to figure out just how big this could possibly be.
Great. And then, yeah, so then they go back to the first part is asking about like the regulation and policy around AI.
I think it's something that lawmakers are definitely very much aware of. I'm sure so many of us that do pay attention to what's happening on Capitol Hill, or at least have read about it. I mean, we have seen, you know, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook in and out of testifying rooms on Capitol Hill, testifying about what type of content that they're releasing on Facebook. And a lot of those are driven, by the way, they're targeting through AI algorithms in particular. And so I think that what policymakers and their staff are, again, trying to figure out, being a moving target, is how strict those regulations can be without completely stifling creativity and their own ability to use it for some of the benefits that I covered.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great, thank you. And this is just a question from me. So within your organization, aside from data analytics and predictive AI, how do you all use generative AI on a daily basis?
A lot of it helps with the marketing material that we produce. We like to work in an omni-channel type setting, what we call a surround sound. And so we're not hyper focused on one singular channel, but we're looking at the ability to take Dr. Hernandez's likes and preferences and what your motivations are, serve you ads based off of those likes and preferences, but make sure that we are hitting you on a number of different channels, from direct mail to linear television to, of course, within the digital space. Because a rising tide lifts all boats, and AI allows you to generate quality content quickly. But I will tell you internally that, you know, we have our own best practices in place so that images don't get out of control, you know, because there's always the question of authenticity. And we always want to make sure that we're leading with that. And so because of how much work we do have our own internal best practices on what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, and I mean, from an academic standpoint, obviously students use generative AI. I use it in my classroom. I do exercises with it, and they're going to be using it in the workplace. But of course, there's the idea of what is the idea of education itself, be critical thinkers, and all of these things that generative AI takes away. Like, yeah, like you said, you have to have an accurate prompt to get what you want, and so you have to do that. And so there's this, you know, in higher education and many other fields, it's okay. So how do we teach? I mean, our students are using them, but how do we still say, like, you still need to be able to generate your own content, even though, yes, you can easily ask ChatGPT to do it for you, and it will. And it's not going to be perfect, but it'll do the job good enough. So, you know, finding that balance, you know, and they're going to go into the workplace, and people will ask them, just throw it in ChatGPT, like, get it done in 4 seconds, like efficiency, like get it done, get it out. And so, finding that balance, and that's something that I think a lot of educators struggle with, and some professors like refuse to ever use it. And I'm like, we need to work on this together. And so that's why I was asking how in your organization you use it, just from a standpoint of if someone was going to come to work for your organization, what would you want them to know, be able to do with either predictive AI or generative AI?
Well, I will use my own presentation as the example. Because how do you not do a presentation on AI and not start to test AI and some of these
Absolutely.
different programs? Like, you have to. I'm going to get up here and speak about it for 45 minutes. I better have at least tried Copilot or ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I'm really bummed out that these weren't around when I was in college. I mean, it is incredible, the ability to access vast amounts of data quickly. It is scary, and it is amazing all at the same time. But what I did find in crafting my own research for this presentation, I liked to look at the content that it was generating and even some of the citations. I will tell you though, you still have to QC and fact check it though. Because why? Because you can put into a prompt, if you were to go into ChatGPT and says, what is predictive AI? Well, what it is pulling from, it is scraping the internet based off of your prompt. And guess what's on the internet? A lot of junk. I mean, like, let's be honest, but it doesn't know that. It just know that a blog post was written on such and such date by author so-and-so, and it's going to put that text up there because it's in close alignment to what the answer you're seeking, right? And so it is a fabulous way to create content and do research very quickly, but you have to use your own safeguards and you have to QC your own work so that I am not quoting Wikipedia, which could be changed on a dime. I have to make sure that the sources that it's pulling from are legit and that they're trustworthy. And so, but if you use it blindly and use it as gospel, I think you could get yourself in trouble.
Definitely.
Mhm.
I have a question from Jocelyn. So the personal specific data profiles for individuals that allow for effective micro-targeting seem to open up major cyber vulnerabilities. Should there be a breach? How can we trust that private companies will be proactive about protecting our personal profiles when legislation is far too slow to keep up with advances in AI technology and data collection?
Well, I will tell you, having worked for 3 big data companies, there is a ton of investment that is made within data security and data privacy. And again, it comes back to our own best practices that we also like to put in there. It is a rare thing to be hacked by a cyber criminal and to have your information out there. Um, I feel sorry for people that do, but it does happen. And I'm lucky enough to say I haven't worked anywhere where that has happened because of the amount of investment. This is kind of where cloud-based infrastructure really comes into play, because where and how you store your data is really a big deal. And if you have old, outdated infrastructure that kind of allows for people to penetrate those systems and have access to something like transactional data, how you're spending your money, which is very sensitive information, by the way. Some people work with hospitals. Think about HIPAA information, these cloud-based environments, which are incredibly secure and very hard to penetrate, it's worth the investment in investing in them to just make sure that you don't have to run into an issue like that. I will say this, Jocelyn, though, it does help with marketing a great deal, because if we didn't have access to any of your data, I would just send you thousands of ads a day that you would probably hate. But because I know probably where you work out, if you belong to a gym, where you've made purchases for fashion or workout clothes, or where you have eaten, or how you have voted, because I can take all this data, boil it down, and then figure out now how to serve you content that's very relevant to what you want to see, it enables for a better user experience. If we didn't have data like that, I'd just send you ads all day long like a shotgun and it would be terrible. So we use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer approach.
Great. Let's see. Now we have just a few more minutes. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. Is there any last questions, or Heather, do you have any last final thoughts that you want to share?
I've had a great time. I do. I want to thank you very much, Dr. Hernandez, and Johns Hopkins University, the communications department, for inviting me. I think it's such a timely topic. It would be interesting to kind of revisit this after the election cycle.
Yeah,
To
definitely.
kind of, to kind of see what new implementations were made, and kind of
We'll hold you to that then.
All right, well, sign me up. There you go.
2025.
Yeah, it would be kind of fun, given where we are, and like I said, how this technology is evolving, how quickly it's evolving, what stands to be done this election cycle, and kind of analyze it from there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, sharing your expertise and experiences. And thank you everyone for participating. This is being recorded, and we'll have it up on our YouTube channel, and we'll share it on social media as well. And thanks again, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.